Marvel. Oh, I should have beef and broccoli soup. What about you, Dr. Hartman? Do you like beef and broccoli soup?
Beef barley?
Beef and broccoli soup.
I probably would eat it,
You a clam chowder fan?
yeah.
Oh, good. I was afraid I was learning from a heathen, but he likes clam chowder, so we're good. I actually love clam chowder. I don't think I'm funny this way. What? You never had clam chowder?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start off today by returning some old quizzes and homework assignments. Some of the quizzes were good, some of the quizzes were not so good. So it is what it is, and well, we gotta move on from here. So anyways, let me take a few minutes to do this. So, the quizzes gave me an idea kind of where everyone is at in terms of scales and key signatures. It gives me an idea also of how prepared or how ill-prepared we might be for an upcoming test. You know, I think we have a test a week from Friday. So that's where we are. Right now, we're in the middle of chapter 2 in your textbook, which is all about rhythm and meter. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a look at the homework assignment that you have for today. There were 6 musical examples. And what I wanted you to do was identify, based on the notation of those examples, whether or not the meter type was duple, triple, or quadruple, and whether or not the beat type was simple or compound. Simple or compound. Okay, because the notation is what we can rely on and use to tell us how many beats are in a measure and how the beat divides. So, I am going to collect this today in a few minutes, but let me take some questions if someone has a question on any one of those 6. Yes? Okay, number 2. Yeah, and I think what I'll do is, I'm just going to maybe put one measure up here because that'll be enough. And I don't even think we're going to deal with the pitches. I'm just going to put the rhythm up here because that's all we're concerned about. So, for instance, number 2, if I look at the first measure, looks like it has 4/16, and it has an 1/8. And then it's followed by 2/16, an 1/8, and and 2 more 16ths. Let's see, there we go. I think that's it. All right, so I'm going to use this measure, that is the first measure of number 2, to help me identify the meter type and the beat type. Now, remember one of the most important rules about rhythmic notation is that any notes connected by a beam belong to one and the same beat. Okay? Any notes connected by a beam belong to one and the same beat. So, aside from this secondary beam up here, let's look at the main outermost beam here. How many beats do you see based on what's beamed together here and what's beamed together here? 2 beats, right? Because we know the rule says if these are connected by a beam, they all have to belong to one beat, and they all have to belong to the same beat. Okay, so this right here is B1, and this, since they're all connected by a beam, is B2. So based on that information, you don't have to try going down other paths or other roads or making it more complicated than it needs to be. What would you circle for the meter type? Would you circle duple, triple, or quadruple? Duple. Duple means 2 beats in a minute. Okay? So that's the first half. Now we have to ask ourselves into how many equal smaller parts does the beat divide? And remember that divisions of the beat, just like the beat itself, the beats all in the measure, all in example beats always have to be the same length. And so do divisions of the beat. Divisions of the beat have to be the same length too. They have to be the same duration. So it's tempting to think, well, let me look at beat 1. Can I just say, oh, that divides into 1, 2, 5. It divides into 5 smaller parts. That doesn't help us very much. It doesn't make sense. You know why? Because these smaller parts are not all the same rhythm. They're not all the same duration or value. You know? I'm comparing apples with oranges if I look at it that way. And I need to compare just 16th notes or just 8th notes so I get a better picture. Okay? Well, I know that the beat divides only 2 ways. It either divides into 2 smaller parts or 3 smaller parts. Could you look at these 16th notes and say, these 2 16th notes equal or add up to an 8th, right? Right, 2 16ths take up the same time span as an 8th. And then I could look at these 2 right here in the middle and say, these 2 16th notes add up to an 8th. So if I think of these 2 16ths as an 8th, and these 2 16ths as an 8th, and this is an 8th right here, into how many equal parts does a beat divide into? 2 or 3? Those are your only choices. So is the beat type simple or compound? Compound. So my final answer for number 2 would be duple, compound. And you might say, but what about that dotted half note in the last measure? Doesn't that divide into 3 quarter notes? Yes, but it could then also divide into 2 dotted quarter notes. And those would be your 2 beats. So the last measure is not contrary to what we just looked at. The last measure still can be true, it still holds, and can confirm and support what we're looking at in the first measure. So I hope that answers question number 2. Got time for another question if someone's got one? I'm just trying to think what class to do. Or maybe it's just a recording. All right, last call for questions before I collect this. Very good. Then make sure your name is somewhere at the top for me and I'll pick this up. Oh, we got some for the, oh yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
okay. So today, what I'd like to focus on is I'd like to talk about, all right, now that we know how to maybe determine whether or not the meter we're looking at in a musical passage is simple or compound, or duple, triple, quadruple. Now, what does that mean in terms of the time signatures? You guys all know what time signatures are? Deal with those? Okay. All right, so I'll get to that in just a minute or two, maybe 2 minutes. Let me ask you this, for those of you especially that were here last week or last Friday, let me find a question that I want to ask. Page 20, here we go. What is the term that refers to the number of beats in a measure? What term do we use that tells us or describes the number of beats in a measure? Should be on, those of you that have that handout now. Go ahead. Yeah, it's called meter type, remember? The meter type is what tells us how the measure divides, into how many beats the measure divides. That's called meter type. And there were 3 meter types. Now don't overthink this. What are the 3 meter types? That's right, duple, triple, and quadruple. If it's duple, that means there's 2 beats in a measure. Triple means 3 beats in a measure, and quadruple means 4 beats in a measure. Okay. Now that's how the measure divides. Well, let's take a look at just 1 beat now in the measure. What is the term that refers to the way in which the beat divides further?
Meter type?
Yes, beat type, good. So we have meter type that tells us how the measure divides into smaller parts. But then each beat divides into smaller parts. That's called beat type. And what are the 2 beat types? We only have 2. Simple and compound. Simple means the beat divides into 2 equal parts. For instance, let's say you have a beat that's a quarter note. It divides into 2 equal parts, like 2/8. Compound means that the beat divides into 3 equal parts. So those are 2 really important terms, really important subjects and topics that we talked about last week. To start talking about time signatures now, I would suspect that a lot of you here learned that the top number of a time signature tells you how many beats are in a measure, and the bottom number of a time signature tells you what note duration represents or gets the beat, right? For instance, if you had any music in elementary school, if not, the junior high, certainly the high school level, somewhere in there you must have heard, or you probably had to deal with what a time signature is. And you learned that the top number tells you the number of beats in a measure, and the bottom number tells you what note duration gets the beat. Well, I will tell you that that statement is true, but it's not true all of the time. It's only true with some time signatures, but not all time signatures. So let's start with what I consider to be the easier of the 2 types of time signatures, and that is what we call simple time signatures versus compound time signatures. Compound time signatures are kind of just what they sound like. They're a little bit more involved. Simple time signatures, they're called simple not because they're easy, although they are easier than the other time. But they're called simple because the beat divides into just 2 equal parts. Okay. All right. So, music that makes use of simple beat division. In other words, a beat that divides into 2 smaller parts. That type of music will always have the number 2, 3, or 4 as the top number on the time signature. That's an important statement. I'll say that again. It's true, it's always true too. There are no exceptions. Music that uses simple beat type. In other words, if the beat divides into 2 equal parts, 2 divisions, then the time signature will always have a 2, a 3, or a 4 as its top number. We can take that information to that. A time signature with a 2, a 3, or a 4 as its top number is called a simple time signature. Again, not because it's necessarily easy. It's called a simple time signature because we are guaranteed that when the top number of a time signature is 2, 3, or 4, we know we're dealing with simple beat type. In other words, we know, how the beat is already going to divide. It's going to divide into 2 parts, 2 smaller parts, not 3. That 2, 3, or 4 on the top will tell us that. So, in a sense, we could also say that now that you know that about a time signature will also tell us the beat time of a piece of passive music. We can deduce that if it's 2, 3, or 4 is the top number, we know that the beat divides into 2 smaller parts. There are 2 divisions per beat. Okay, so it's called a simple time signature. Okay, and what do the numbers of a simple time signature tell us again? The top number tells us the number of beats in a measure, and the bottom number tells us what note value or what duration gets the beat. Okay? And the bottom number can be a variety of things. It's going to be a number that represents the durations we have in music. So for instance, could I have a bottom number be 16? Yes, because we have 16th notes in music. Could it be a 2, the bottom number? Yes, because we have half notes in music. If it's a 4, that means it represents a quarter note. An 8 would represent an 8th note, and so on. Okay. So for instance, I could have a meter's simple time signature of 2/8. What that would mean is that there are 2 beats per measure, and that the 8th note is the length of 1 beat. So how many 8th notes would fit in a measure of 2/8? 2, yeah. And maybe a little more common time signature that you may be used to, 3/4, which is very often used for waltzes and other things, means there are 3 beats in a measure, and that also means that it's triple meter type, right? Duple, triple, quadruple. So 3 beats in a measure, and the quarter note gets the beat.
For something like 2/8, would you still leave those 8 notes, or would you leave them separate, flat?
Technically, I would leave them separately flagged.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, if not next class, then next week. We'll get there. Can you see over this, Sam? You're good? Okay. All right. Another possibility, we can have a time signature as 4/16. It means there are 4 beats in a measure, and each beat is a 16th note. So a measure would hold 4 16th notes. And I like simple time signatures because it's basically what you see is what you get. They tell you information directly about what's happening at the beat level, and that's what we want to know. That's the most important information for us to identify whether it's duple, triple, or quadruple, that kind of thing. Okay? So, yes, what you have learned, if you learned it as a small or as a child, the top number in simple time signatures, it does tell you the number of beats in a measure, and it does tell you the bottom number, what the beat duration is. That's true. Couple of things that I want you to either know and or avoid. Please do not, even though it's easy, please do not write time signatures as fractions. So for instance, you don't want to write 3/4 meter like that. To me, that looks like I need 3/4 a cup of sugar or something for cooked baking, or whatever. So no lines are needed in time signatures, just one number directly over another number. No slashes, no horizontal lines, no nothing. Because they're not fractions. Another point I want to make is this. You may have seen a time signature in the past that looks kind of like that, just a C. That is a simple time signature. It stands for common time. Does anyone know what the number time signature is? 4/4, that's right. Okay. So common time is what the C stands for, and it represents, or is tantamount, equivalent to 4/4. So in your voice lessons, your instrument lessons, in any ensembles, in any bands, or whatever that you play, any choirs, if you see this time signature, it means 4/4. And if your teacher tells you otherwise, then send them to me. Okay. All right, now there's another one that's not as common, but you sometimes see it, and that looks like this. Does that mean that your music, the music that you bought, costs 1 cent?
Sure.
No. That symbol with the slash down through it stands for cut time. Does anyone know what the number time signature is for cut time?
Is it 2/2?
It is. It's 2/2. Yeah. It's not 2/4. It's not 2/8 or anything like that, but it is 2/2. Well, I promise not to speak of your 2/2 if you don't talk about my 2/2. Pretty bad over here. Let's take just a few minutes and go through a chart that's on the top of page 29 in your text. I'll see if this device here, document camera, is working. And I suppose I need to turn on the TVs to get some results. Whoops. All right, so the top of page 29. Then this is probably better than anything you find on your TV. This is must-see TV. We have a chart with its various columns. You can see the column headings, and then we have some rows with the various exercises. I want to see if you can orally or verbally just kind of talk through what goes into blanks. So if I start with number 1, that row, and I see that the beat and the meter type is simple duple, the fact that it's simple tells me the top number of my time signature over there on the right has to be a 2, 3, or 4. It can't be anything else because it tells me simple. What does the duple mean? Yeah, it means the top number is a 2. There's 2 beats in a measure. So the time signature I already know is going to be 2. Top number is 2. And look at this next column here. The beat note is a quarter note. So what's the bottom number of my time signature going to be? 4. So my final answer for time signature is 2, 4. 2 I get from the word duple. 4 I get from the fact that it tells me the quarter note is the beat. Make sense? Now, what would you put in the division of the beat? That's not really necessary for this, but a quarter note equals 2 what? Eighth notes, yeah, so you draw 2 eighth notes in there. You don't really have to do the division of the beat column so much. But the fact that it says it's simple tells you that it should be 2 of something. The division of the beat is 2 of something, not 3 of something. Okay. Number 2. Now we're given the time signature. What should the beat and meter type be because the top number is 3? Triple? And what kind of triple? Compound or simple? Simple triple. Simple triple. I would totally agree. What note duration goes in the beat note column based on the bottom number of the time signature? eighth note. And then what would go in the division column? Two what? Does this make sense? Let's keep going. Number 3. Well, we're given the top number of the time signature, so the leftmost column should say simple what? Simple duple, I would agree. And I don't know what the bottom number should be yet, but I know that if there's 2 quarter notes as the division, the beat would be 1 what? Half note. And what number is that for the bottom number? 2. Yeah. So again, the time signature would get back to 2-2 again. Okay, 2-2. Number 4, simple quadruple. What's the top number of my time signature? 4. Quadruple. And fill in your mind, what should the beat note be? Yeah, an eighth, because there's 2/16 in the division, so an eighth. So the time signature should be 4 over 8. That's right. 4/8. And the last one, simple triple. Look, we don't even need to deal with the division of the beat column. It's 3 over what? 16. It's pretty straightforward. 3/16. Okay. So that's simple time signature. What I hesitate to, even though we have to go through it, what I hesitate to do is go on from here and talk about how compound time signatures work. Because compound time signatures can really mess with your mind if you're not paying attention. Sometimes they, well, in a lot of students' cases, compound time signatures are not at all what they expected. But let's go there anyways. Now, when the beat divides into 3 equal parts, like, I'm going to put on the line. 1, 2, 3. When the beat divides into 3 equal parts, as in compound beat type, the note value that is representing the beat itself must be a dotted line. We have to agree on that. We're not dealing with triplets or any kind of syncopation or anything like that. If a beat divides into 3 equal parts, like say my beat division is 3/4, then what would the whole beat value be represented by 1 note? A dotted half, that's right. Remember, the beat is always going to be the next longer duration, and the division is always 1 duration shorter. So if I had, let's say my beat division was 3/16, what is my beat duration going to be? 1 note. Dotted eighth, that's right. But no matter what I do, if my beat divides into 3 parts, the beat itself has to be a dotted value. It has to be. Okay. Now, dotted values, dotted notes, present problems where time signatures are concerned. For example, let's pretend that in this diagram up here that this is a measure here, compound duple. Let's pretend that that's a measure of music. If there are 2 beats per measure, and the beat note is a dotted quarter, what should the time signature be? You see what I'm saying? If I needed to write a time signature for this, pretending just this much was a measure, would I write the time signature as this? But it's a dotted. Okay, you don't like that one? What about this? This maybe is going to work. Right? A dotted quarter is like a quarter plus an eighth. It's not very clear either. Okay. I get it. Okay, just forget everything else. This is going to be my time signature. Can I do that? No, unfortunately, I can't do that either. But the dotted quarter is the beat, and there's two of them in a measure. Well, you see dotted nodes, as I said before, they present problems where time signatures occur. Because the beat note in compound meters, since it's always a dotted value, notice that dotted nodes can never be represented by a whole number. In other words, in order to represent a dotted note with some kind of numbers, I need either a decimal, or I need a fraction, like 4.5, or I need to start putting other numbers in, and that just gets too awkward. So, what has the solution been come down to us over the centuries? The solution is this. Because dotted nodes can't be represented by a whole number in a time signature, we find that the numbers of a compound time signature give us the information about the division of the beat, not the beat itself. That's a big deal. A lot of people don't know that, and it messes with a lot of people's minds. But compound time signatures will give you the information about the number of divisions in a measure, and the bottom number will tell you the duration of what one division is. It has nothing to do with the beat level. Okay? So if I wanted to put a time signature to this measure, and the top number of a compound time signature tells me how many divisions are in a measure, how many would this be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, right? So there's 6 divisions in this measure. And what's the duration of one division? Is that an eighth, a 16th, a half, or what is it? So there's the meter signature for that. Does it tell you directly how many beats are in a measure? No, it does not. It just gives you the information at the position of the beat. So, compound time signatures. In other words, time signatures where the beat divides into 3 equal parts. They do not follow the rule that's so often learned by student musicians. A compound time signature provides us with information about the division of the beat, not the beat itself. So, let's figure out what the standard numbers we would see or find in a compound time signature. All right. Again, let's look at this diagram that I have on the board up here. Okay. If there are 2 beats in a measure of compound meter, and there are 3 divisions for each beat, how many total divisions are there? It's 2 times 3. 6, right? So one of the top numbers of a compound time signature, one of the legal ones is 6. What about if we were in compound triple meter? There are 3 beats in a measure, but 3 divisions for every one of those beats. So how many total divisions? 3 times 3 is 9. And finally, if we were in compound quadruple, 4 beats in a measure, but each of those beats divides into 3 parts, so 4 times 3 is 12. All right. So, this is the truth about compound time signatures. The top number of a compound time signature will always be 6, 9, and 12. Again, no exceptions. And so, what that means is, if we see a time signature with a 6, a 9, or a 12 on the top of it, we know that it's already, beat division is compound. We know it's compound. Okay. So, a 2-beat compound measure will have 6 divisions. A 3-beat compound measure will have 9 divisions, and a 4-beat compound measure will have 12 total divisions. 12 total divisions. So, what would a time signature be for this measure right here? What's my top number? 9. And what's the duration of one of these divisions? An eighth mode. 9. What would the time signature be for this measure? 12/8, that's right. All right, so I've mentioned that a compound time signature does not give us information about the beat directly. But if you use one simple little math equation, you can find out how many beats are in a measure with a compound time signature, even though these numbers tell you about the division. If for every beat I have 3 divisions, doesn't it make sense that if I take the top number of this time signature and divide by 3, that will tell me how many beats, full whole beats there are in a measure? That's true. So this is important as well. With a compound time signature, the top number 6, 9, or 12, divide the top number by 3, and that'll tell you how many beats are in the measure. Whether or not you're dealing with duple, triple, or quadruple. Okay? So, 6 divisions in a measure. How many beats in a measure? 2. So anything with a 6 as the top number is duple. 2 full beats. You can see that over there. How many beats in a measure with 9 as the top number? 3 beats, that's triple. And how many beats in a measure with 12 divisions? 4 beats. Triple, triple, quadruple. Okay? Now, let's try this. I'm in this checkpoint box right here on page, this is page 31. What 3 numbers are found on the top of simple time signatures? 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, or 4. What 3 numbers are found on the top of compound time signatures? 6, 9, or 12. And finally, number 3, if the top number of a compound signature is 9, how many beats will be in the measure? 3. Okay. We're not going to do all of this, but I do want to go through one. And I don't want this to totally mess with your mind. But let's take a look at the first. Yeah, let's look at the first row. Compound duple. The beat note is a dotted quarter. First of all, what's the division of the beat going to be? 3 what? 3/8, okay? So now, the time signature, remember, if the division is the 8th note, what's the bottom number of my time signature going to be? 8, because that's the divisions value. And how many 8th notes, or how many divisions would fit in a measure if there's 2 beats, and each beat has 3 divisions? 6. So the final answer is 6/8 for that top row. Maybe just one more, and then we got to go to something else. Let's go the other way. Row number 2. The time signature is 9/4. The division of the beat, we should be able to get that. It's 3 what? 3/4 because of the 4. That's the division. Okay? Imagine 3/4 right there. What one note value represents the beat if 3/4 fit into it? Dotted half, yeah. See, you're doing it. That's it. And then finally, we know that the beat meter type is going to be compound what? Triple, because 9, the top number divided by 3, gives you 3 beats. This isn't so bad. I mean, you got to do a little more thinking. There's more steps. You got to do some computing. But it's possible if you know what the numbers are referring to and you don't forget them. Okay? All right. Now, what I want to do is take the last amount of time that we have I don't know, for those of you that were here last, I gave you a handout that looks like this, and on the back, there's a thing that looks like this. Does anyone need one? Okay, I've got a few here. Okay. Anyone else need it? Okay, one back there. So I want to look on the side of the page with the musical examples. Those of you that were here last Friday, we identified the meter type and the beat type for several of these. On the left side, in the left column. Let's start with the top left of the page. There we go. Now, last class, we identified that the meter beat type, the first example up there was quadruple compound. It doesn't matter which term you say first. Compound, quadruple, that's fine. But we see that all these notes are a beat because they're beaten together. All these notes form a beat because they're beaten together. All these notes form a beat, and then this is a beat. So that's 4 beats in a measure. And we could see that it's compound because if I look at, for instance, this beat right here, you see how there's 3 equal durations there? The beat divides into 3 eighth notes. And because it divides into 3, it's compound, not simple. But now, let's see if we can put the correct time signature to this example. If it's compound quadruple, is my top number going to be 6, 9, or 12? 12. Okay? 4 beats compound gives us 12. So the top number of the time signature is 12, and that means there's 12 divisions fit in a measure. You could count them up. What, by the way, what is the duration of one? The eighth note, right? Yeah. You can see there's a division, there's a division, there's a division, etc., etc. Okay. So, we said 12 divisions fit in a measure, and a division is an eighth note. So what's the time signature? 12, 8. 12, 8. And I didn't give you enough room to put it in the staff there. I'm just going to write it up above. But that would be the correct time signature for that. How many beats are in a measure? 4. Good. What note value serves as the beat, a whole beat? Dotted quarter. Yeah, do you see that? The 3/8, that's the beat divided already. There's a dotted quarter at the end of that measure. That's the full beat. And 4 of those fit in the measure. Okay. Let's go down to another one. Go down to the third one there. It's, this one right here. We determined last class that example was an example of, what was it? Simple triple. Simple triple. Because if you look at this measure, I can see there's a beat, those are beaten together, there's another beat, and if 2 eighth notes make up a beat, then a quarter note is the beat itself. So 1 beat, 2 beat, 3 beat. And I know it's simple beat division because the quarter note divides evenly into 2 eighths. Into 2 eighths, not 3. All right, let's put a time signature to this. If this is simple triple, I have to think about my simple time signatures now. What are my top number choices? 2, 3, or 4, and because it's triple, my top number has to be 3, okay? Let's write that in there. Now, remember, simple time signatures do give us information directly about the beat. We don't have to do any extra calculations. So, what is the duration of a beat? A quarter note, and that translates to what number? 4. Okay, so the time signature for this example is correctly 3/4. And hopefully you could, you know, if you're a saxophonist or whatever, you could look at that and you can play that, you know, you could read it no problem, or however it goes. Because you'd be like, yeah, 3, 4, I know how to read that. All right, now the last one. We didn't get this one last time. The one we're going to go. This one's a little trickier, but it's still not impossible. We didn't determine yet whether this is simple or compound or duple, triple, quadruple. Now, you can look at any of these first few measures, and it might look a little bit confusing, but you also got to look at the last measure in connection with these first few measures. And remember the old rule that says, well, what was I going to say? All the beats in an example have to be the same length. So, you can't go to this example and say, there's a beat, there's a beat, there's a beat, there's a beat. You can't do that because those are differing duration values. Beats have to be the same length. And you might say, well, look at the first measure. There's a quarter, an eighth, a quarter, and an eighth. Well, that's a quarter plus 2/8, that's another quarter. Isn't that 3? 3 beats? Well, kind of, but it wouldn't match with the last measure. See, the last measure is notated correctly. How many big chunks do you see in the last measure? 2. Let's go with it. That means there are 2 beats in a measure. So that means I have to divide these other ones to find the beats. I have to divide them, think of them, chop them up like this. You see that? There's beat 1, which contains a quarter and an eighth, and the next beat contains a quarter and an eighth. So what is the length of one beat? Dotted quarter, right? You can see that in the last measure. And that also checks out over here, because a quarter plus an eighth, that's the same time as a dotted quarter, right? Okay, so we're dealing with 2 beats in a measure. If the beat is the dotted quarter, is it going to, I don't have it anymore, is it going to divide into 2 smaller parts or 3? 3. Dotted notes always divide into 3. So we're dealing with compound duple. See, 2 beats, and if the beat divides into 3, that's compound. All right, so the time signature for a compound beat or beat type tells us about the divisions of the beat. What is the duration of one division, one little division? If the beat is the dotted quarter, what's the duration of one little division? The eighth note. So that's the bottom number of your time signature. Because remember, compound time signatures give us information about the division. How many eighth notes now would fit or fill one measure? 6. So the final answer for this is 6/8. Compound duple is always going to be 6 over something. Compound triple is always 9 over something. And compound quadruple is always 12 over something. Whatever the division duration is. All right. Whew. That's a lot of information. I hope you're able to comprehend that and digest that. I'm going to give you a handout for homework for Friday to see if you can apply this information now. The Friday handout, I'm asking you to look at 4 musical examples, and based on the notation, like we did here, I want you to fill in the duple, the triple, the simple, the compound, and the time signature. And then on the back, there's stuff that's a little less confusing. In fact, I don't know, I think it's a little more fun. So this is the only thing that's new on Friday. Yeah, and once you get this, you can go ahead and do my work. You got it? Okay. call them either asymmetric meters or you can call them complex. I've heard both.
That has the different subdivision kind of thing. How to file for different.
Yeah, like if one beat divides something, as far as another beat divides, and all over the same. Yeah, that is the complex.
I was just thinking about that earlier.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. Yeah, it's gonna be chapter 2, so it's gonna start right around page 24, and then all the way to about 32. Yeah, 24 through 32. Yep, that's what we've been talking about.